do I hit this to stop it also?
Yep.
Or just that one? Or both? Okay.
This one's less important. That's the one that's
the one
the video record. Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm just going to give people like 1 more minute to mosey in from lunch. People are usually sluggish after lunch, so. I'm going to get started. So this is R.E.A.D, the 4 steps you should follow for selecting the right modules for your Drupal project. So I just want to let you know, so I have GIFs in this presentation, which means when I have presenter mode on, they don't load in the right order for whatever reason, so I'm going to try to do it without my presenter notes. So if I repeat myself, it's not a bug, it's a feature. So just bear with me. The way I like to start my sessions is to talk a bit about who you guys are and who this session is geared towards. So if you find yourself to be someone who's new to Drupal, since this is the beginner track, or you're more advanced with Drupal but you want to improve habits you've developed over time, or you're just session curious and you want to know what it's all about, then you're welcome to stay. And it's also for people who find their roles. They're either a Drupal developer, so you build Drupal projects and modules and whatnot, or you're a site architect, so you design how projects are being built and how they're organized, or you have some role to play when it comes to making a decision for functionality needs for a Drupal project. And what this session is all about is how to quickly make smart, informed decisions when it comes to your functionality needs. And what I'm going to cover today are the steps to decide between using a contrib module, a patched contrib module, or a custom module. Some real-world examples of using these steps from my personal experiences, and I'll touch on the basics of patches and of writing a custom module. So I like to do these slides first at the beginning of a session. That way, if you know it's not for you, you have time to catch another one. But please stay. So a little bit about myself. My name is Michael Miles. I live and work in Boston, Massachusetts, or as it has been known for the last couple months, Planet Hoth, because we've had like 7 feet of snow. It's been ridiculous. I've worked for the last 7 years at a company called Genuine. We're a full-service digital agency, so we do everything from brand strategy, UX and SEO, video production, interactive apps and touch displays, whole design department, and development in Drupal, .NET, and front-end frameworks. We have our head office in Boston. We also have offices in San Francisco, New York City, and now in Chicago, and we're always hiring, so if you're looking for jobs, check us out. It's a fun place to work for. I've been working with Drupal since 2008, and I've done everything from theme development, module development, site architecture, content entry. If it has to do with building a Drupal site, I've touched it in some way. And I was recently named an Acquia MVP, so I have that going for me, which is nice. I don't really know what it means, but I guess I'm good at what I do. And you can find me on Twitter at MikeMiles86, on Drupal.org, in the IRC channels at MikeMiles86. Anywhere online, it's probably MikeMiles86. And my personal website is mike-miles.com. When I do post, it's usually about Drupal, but it's not that often. All right, so R.E.A.D. What is this awesome acronym that I created? It stands for the 4 steps I found myself over time always following when I had to decide what module to use to fulfill some functionality. It stands for research what exists. This step is about how and where to find modules. Evaluate the options, so how to pare down the modules you find to one that may be your best fit. Analyzing any gap, so figuring out what functionality that module offers versus what you're looking for and where the holes are. And then determining how much change you have to make to that module to get it to do what you need it to do. So research what exists. Like I just said, this step is all about where to find modules and how to find modules. I love my GIFs. It took me the most amount of time is to make the right GIFs for this presentation. So the first thing you want to do is isolate keywords. So read any documentation, user stories, technical specs, emails, client communications, meeting notes, anything you have, and start paring down and paying attention to unique nouns and verbs. So what you're trying to manipulate it and how you're trying to manipulate it. And ask questions. So if you are not clear what you really need to do for your functionality, ask as many questions as you can. Because if you make an assumption, you may assume incorrectly, and you're going to go down a path of building something wrong or building something that you're not supposed to. So isolate keywords, train yourself to pay attention to these things, and use them to perform searches. Google is our friend. We know that as developers. And what's important is that there are 30,000 modules available on Drupal.org today. So whatever you're trying to do, someone has probably done it already. So they've already done the work for you. So you want to look for modules first before you decide to build your own. Go to your favorite search engine. Mine is Google. 3 of you out there might be Bing. And search for Drupal keyword, and that pulls up a nice relevant list of results. Search on Drupal.org, the hub for all things Drupal. Has a great search interface. You can filter, and you can sort by relevancy. And then utilize the community. So the great thing about the Drupal community is we're large, we're vast, and we're very helpful. We're all open source technologists, and we all like to help each other. So go on the IRC channels, Drupal support, ask your questions, say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Anybody have any ideas? They'll give you, people will shout out a list of modules. Use the Drupal Stack Exchange. You can post a question there, or you can see if anyone else has already posted a question, and you can see the answers people provided. So you won't get as immediate results on Stack Exchange as you would at IRC, but it keeps a record of what you've asked, so you can go back in the future and look at it. And then any social network you're a part of probably has a Drupal group. Google Plus does, Facebook does, LinkedIn does. Whatever social network you're on, there's a Drupal group and people who want to help you. There's even a Drupal subreddit. So if anyone out here uses Reddit, you have an excuse to go on it at work. The people are really helpful, and there's a lot of great theme days about modules. So when you research what exists, isolate your keywords for your functionality needs, perform searches with those keywords, and ask the community for help. When you do these 3 things, 99% of the time, you're going to find at least one module that probably does what you're looking for. That 1% of the time where you don't find anything, build a custom module, because there's nothing that exists. So when you do find modules, you want to evaluate them. So this step is all about using metrics that are available on the project page of Drupal.org for that module and seeing or determining, is it the best fit for me? First thing I always do is I read the module's description. A description should answer 3 questions. What does this module do? What does this module not do? And what does this module depend on? The more dependencies a module has, the more complexities there may be involved with using it. And you want to get a sense of, all right, does this module actually do what I think it does? You want to look at community adoption. Who else is using this module and how are they using it? I look at the number of downloads versus installs versus the age of the module. So if a module has been out for a few years, but it has a really low number of downloads or installs, that tells you either the community is backing a different module, or what this module describes it does, it actually does something else. So it doesn't fulfill the needs it says it does. I look at the activity of the issue queue. So if a module has a lot of issues, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, because it shows the community is active with this module and they're trying to make it better. Yeah. So that's what I said. The issue queue also helps you determine maintainer activity. So does the maintainer participate in the issue queue? Are there just bugs sitting there? Are there questions sitting there and the maintainer's not being active and not helping the community understand or improve their module? Is the maintainer accepting feedback? Are users submitting patches and is the maintainer evaluating those and merging them in? And is the maintainer making regular commits or releases? If a maintainer released a module that you're looking to use 2 years ago and then they made one commit with the initial code and they haven't touched it since, if you use that module and a security issue comes out for it, you're responsible on your project for closing that issue. If the maintainer is very active, they're going to be able to fix that and release an update to the module. So when you read the description, look at the community adoption, and check the maintainer activity, you're going to be able to usually pare down a best fit module. If you eliminate all your options, you don't like what you read, then again, no module fits your needs, you may want to build a custom module. So with any module that you do find that is your best fit, you want to analyze the gap in functionality. So this is what the module offers in functionality, what you're looking for, and what it's missing. I like this GIF the best. This is my favorite. First thing I do is I download and test the module. You want to play with it, get an understanding of what it does. I like to use a sandbox environment. Simpletest.me is a really easy environment to use. You go to it, you type in the name of the module, and it will spin up a Drupal site for you. I think with the free accounts, you get about a half hour to play with it. It'll also install any dependencies that it will require. So it gives you a better understanding of what that module does. Right, you're looking for what's offered out of the box with this module, how quickly can I get it set up, and how quickly can I use it. And when you're playing with it, you're going to discover the missing functionality. Right, what does this module not do versus what you're looking for? If the module is missing 80% of your functionality needs, well, that's a big gap. That's a big warning, right? If it's just missing a little bit, then it may not be that big of a deal. The bigger the gap, obviously the bigger the effort is to fill it. With any gaps, though, again, utilize the community. Check for community solutions. Go back to the project page on Drupal.org, and you can take a look at the issue queue, put in your keyword for your functionality, and see, has anyone come across this issue? Have they submitted a patch, or has the maintainer said, hey, here's another module you can use to fulfill that? Do another Google search, or a search for Drupal, the module name, and that specific piece of functionality. That'll bring up other issues like on Stack Overflow or other networks where people have run into the same problems and their solutions. And again, it's all about asking questions. Go back to the IRC channels and say, hey, I'm using this module, and I'm trying to do Y. Has anyone tried to do that before? You can have a great conversation with someone who can really fill in those gaps for you. So download, test the module, play with it, discover what functionality is missing, and then check for community solutions. If at the end of all this, there's still a gap in functionality, then you know there's going to be some more work you have to do. But if you're able to solve that gap, there's a patch available, or there's another module you can use on top of the module you want to use that solution, and you're done, right? Someone else has done the work for you. There's nothing you have to do. But for any gaps, then you have to determine how much of that original module you have to change to close them. First thing you want to do is review the module's code. You have to be able to understand the code to be able to know, can you change it? So you're looking for, does it follow coding standards? The Drupal coding standards are in place so that everyone can understand what code's doing. Specifically, well, I think it's really helpful if you're writing code. That means 6 months later you can go back and still understand what you did. It's the same for looking at someone else's code. You're looking to see, is this module extendable? Does it make use of hooks or available APIs that you can hook onto to then alter the functionality to fit your needs? And ultimately, you're trying to see, can you figure out what does what? What functions change which data so that you understand how you can close the gaps. And when you understand the code, you can start to estimate the effort. How much of the original code do you have to rewrite to close your gaps? How much code do you have to add to write to close the gaps? Adding code is definitely a lot easier than rewriting someone else's code. And you have to ask yourself, how much time do I have to do this? Right? If you think the effort is going to be, you have to rewrite a lot of code, you have to add a lot of code, but you don't have a lot of time, then those are things you have to take into account. And you want to ask yourself, am I extending this module or altering this module with my changes? So by extending, are you adding additional functionality on top of what the module already does? Oh, what happened? Wrong button. By altering, you're changing the functionality. You're changing the module's goals from what it seeks to do to make it do something else. That's altering the module. So you review the code, gain an understanding of it, estimate the effort it would take to close your gaps by changing that code, and ask yourself, are you extending or altering this module? If you're extending the module, or you're making small amounts to change, you may want to just write a patch for it, because patches that are small are easy to maintain. But if you're drastically altering the module, or you're adding a whole lot of code and it takes a whole lot of effort, you may want to instead write out your own custom module. Especially if you're going to alter what that module seeks to do, you're technically building another module. Just write a custom one instead that you can maintain. So this is the first time I've done this presentation in Reveal. I used to do it in Keynote, and this was all nice step through for the chart, but I have this awesome flow chart I also have available online that really shows how to go through these steps. So starting on your right? No, your left. Research. Are you able to find modules? If you can't find any modules, build a custom one. If you do find modules, then evaluate them. Is there one that's the best fit? If there isn't, build a custom module. If you can find one that's the best fit, analyze it. Is there a gap in its functionality? If there's no gap, great. Use that module as is. You're done. You only have to not read. If there is a gap, check the community. Is there a solution that exists to close that gap? If there is, use that community solution. If there isn't, then determine how big of a change do you have to make to that module to close your gaps. If it's a small change that doesn't drastically alter the module, write a patch for it. If it's a big change or you're drastically altering the module, then build a custom one. So I know this chart makes it look like that most of the time you're going to build a custom module, but I can tell you from my experience, more likely than not, you're either going to use an existing module or use an existing module with a community solution. Patching and building custom modules are usually the last avenues you have to go down. So, like I said, there's real-world examples, because just like I don't gain an understanding of using a module until I play with it, I don't grasp concepts until I actually see them working. So I'm going to go through two scenarios from my actual experiences. We're going to go through the steps of R.E.A.D. You're going to see which avenue I ended up on. So the first scenario, in my requirements, which I've cleaned up in a pseudo behat Gherkin language, I wish all my requirements came to me like this. It says, when saving a file entity and it's a JPEG image, then the EXIF metadata needs to be captured and mapped to custom fields, and these mappings need to be exportable using features. So I research what exists. I isolate some keywords from these requirements. Focus on file entity, EXIF metadata, mapped to custom fields, and exportable using features. What really sticks out to me, though, is EXIF. It's a very specific term. It doesn't mean a whole lot of things. So I performed some searches using that. I go to Google. I type in Drupal EXIF. I come up with a list of potential modules. The EXIF module, the EXIF custom module, EXIF orientation. And the second result there is an example of using the community. It's a comparison of EXIF modules for Drupal 7. So users have created this table that explain what these EXIF modules do, as well as there's a link to EXIF custom. Come on, go get it. There we go. That talks through the different steps you need to install this module. Reading these steps, it sounds like it may be my best fit. So I want to evaluate my options. For this scenario, I'm going to evaluate the EXIF custom module. I go to the Drupal.org project page and I look at the different metrics. So I read the module description, which says I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it allows for automatic populations of EXIF data into file entity fields. File entity was one of my other keywords. It also says that these mappings are able to be made between the metadata tags and entity fields. So those are custom mappings I want to set up. I look at community adoption. So the modules, downloads, and installs and age. The downloads and installs are very low. For its age is only 2 years. I don't hold this metric in high regards for this scenario because EXIF is very custom, so not a lot of people have to use it. Then I also look at the maintainer activity. The module's been up for 2 years, and the maintainer has committed 23 times, so about once a month. So they seem to be very active. There are a good number of issues. Well, there is a number of issues and bugs, and half of them seem to be closed. So that tells me that people are contributing back to this module, and that the maintainer is taking in their changes. So I want to analyze the gap for this module. I download and test it. I see that I can create custom mappings, like it says, between EXIF data and my file entity fields. Then when I upload a JPEG image for a file entity, it populates the EXIF data as it's present. But I discovered that there's no features functionality. I can't create a feature, and I can't export my mappings between the fields and the EXIF data. So I go to the issue queue on Drupal.org for this module, and I type in features, and there are no issues. So people haven't brought this up. I don't have any community solutions to rely on. So I have to determine how much do I need to change to close my gap. I take a look at the code. It looks pretty well written. It pretty much follows the Drupal coding standards. I can easily figure out how mappings are exported and how they're imported into the database. Using that, I can estimate some of the effort that I need to close this gap. I'm adding features integration. All I have to alter, looking at my code, is that I have to change the primary key. Right now it's a serial ID, which don't export very well. So maybe I'll change it to like a machine name. And I think the time to do this is pretty minimal. Features integration, if you look it up, it's very well documented, and it's not a lot of code to add to a module to make it work. So am I extending or altering this module? Well, I'm adding feature support. I'm not changing what the module seeks to do. It's still going to create mappings between EXIF data and entity fields. So ultimately, I'm extending it. I'm adding additional functionality. So which path do you guys think I chose? Did I use the module as is? Did I patch the module? Or did I write my own module? Who has a guess? Patch. Yeah, you guys are smart. This guy's doing the cabbage patch, in case you're not aware. So why did I patch the module? Well, it meets 90% of my functionality needs already. It was just missing features integration. And that gap was small, and the effort was small to close it. And it ultimately, what I'm going to add is extends what the module does already. So that's what I did. I patched the module. There was no issue on the issue queue, so I created a new issue, and I told the maintainer, hey, it'd be helpful if this module had features integration so we could export mappings and import them. I submit my patch following Drupal naming conventions for patches, which is usually the module name, a brief description, the node ID for the issue, and the comment ID. And along with my patch, I also say, hey, this is what this patch does. It adds features integration, and I also made a change to the IDs you're using, just to give them a heads up. After a couple months, I didn't have enough room to show it here. Other people chime in and say, hey, this patch works as expected. Maintainer comes along. He says, hey, that's great. And he merged it in to the latest release of EXIF Custom. And then he closes this issue. So now if you ever have to use EXIF Custom, because of work I need for myself, I wanted to get back and contribute my patch, you can now export the mappings through features. So that's helping the community. So what is a patch? Drupal.org/patch provides way more information than I could go into here. I could give a whole session on patches. There might even be a session on patches. Patches are really important for sprints if you want to sprint on Sunday, which you do. But basically, a patch is a structured list of changes to files that are reapplicable to other files. So you make changes to files, you export what those changes were, you give that list of changes to somebody else, and they can recreate your changes on their version of the files. What time is it? 23 minutes. So in this section, and they focus on a single change. I forgot to add that. The more complicated a patch, the harder it is to maintain, and the less likely it is to be merged back into a project if you contribute it back. So it's a single change in functionality. Now in this section, I have a whole section of creating a patch and contributing a patch, but for time's sake, I can't go into it. But I'll have these slides available and this presentation available so you can check it out after. I apologize for that. But I want to go into my second scenario. So my requirements for this one are when a site uses Workbench to moderate content, then I can create multiple transitions between states, moderation states. Workbench is a workflow module if you don't know. And transitions are exportable using features. And then when editing a content revision, so a node revision, I can schedule a transition and I can select the date for the first moderation state and a date for the second moderation state. So these are a lot more requirements. But I want to research what exists and isolate some keywords. Workbench, transitions between states, features, content revision, and schedule a transition. And what I'm really going to focus on are Workbench and schedule, because that describes what I'm trying to alter and how I'm trying to alter it. So I searched on Drupal.org this time, and I put in Workbench schedule. I do a search, and I see there's the scheduler Workbench integration module. And then there's no other real modules. There's some description about issues with this module, and then the Workbench module. So I want to evaluate this option. I want to look at the scheduler Workbench integration module. I read the module's description. It says it allows integration between the schedule module and the Workbench moderation module, and that you can select schedules to publish and unpublish nodes. And it also tells me its requirements, that it relies on the schedule module of 7x 1.1 or higher, and the Workbench moderation module. I look at the community adoption. Again, the number of installs and downloads are not that high. I mean, they're all right. And this is also, again, an instance where it's very specific. Not everyone in Drupal is going to need to use this module. But I look at the maintainer activity, however, and it was contributed 2 years ago, and the maintainers made 2 commits. The last one was a year ago. So they haven't really touched this module. On top of that, the number of issues and bug reports is really low. That either means this module is written really well, or people aren't contributing back to it that often. So I analyzed the gap in functionality with this module. I download, test it. For a content type, I can create a schedule. I can select that they can schedule the publish and unpublished dates and what those moderation states are. And then when I create a node, I can select the date. Where is it? I can select the date to publish it and the date to unpublish it. Kind of similar to what my requirements are asking for. But what's missing from it? I'm unable to create different transitions per content type. So what that means is I can select the published state and the unpublished state for one content type. I can't say, for this node, I want it to go from published to archive. It's either all nodes of that type have to go from published to archive. And I'm unable to select per revision. So for a node, because the transitions are tied to the content type, I can't choose different transitions between different node revisions. And again, there's no feature support, but I know that's not that big of a deal. So what do I have to change for this module? I look at the code. It's written really well, actually. Follows the Drupal coding standards. It's well documented and commented, and I can tell what parts of the code do what. The effort it would take to change this. Well, I'd have to refactor how schedules and transitions are created, because I want to decouple them from content types so that I can choose different ones per node. No, that's what I said. And I have to add features integration. And I think this refactoring is going to take me time. It's a lot of effort to basically take out what the module is doing and try to make it do something else. Right, so am I extending or altering it? Well, I'm changing how transitions and schedules are created, and I'm changing the purpose of the module. The module does an excellent job if you want to be able to schedule the publish and unpublished dates for a node, but doesn't do a great job if you want to be able to select what the transitions are and schedule those. So I have to alter the module to do that. I'm altering its goals. So which path did I choose? Use the module as is, patch the module, or write my own module. Right, I wrote my own. Why did I write my own module? Well, it would have been way too big and complicated to be a patch for that module to make my changes. I would ultimately alter what the module is seeking to do. And from my research, I know there's no other module that exists to support my use cases. That's pretty good on time. So I'm pretty good, actually
I speak a lot faster than I think I do.
So for writing a module, if you go to drupal.org/developing/modules, has a lot of awesome information on how to write modules, standards to follow. But basically, like I said, the most important thing is follow the Drupal coding standards. So not only that you understand your code when you have to go back and update it, but others understand your code when they want to evaluate it, when they want to extend it. Make use of hooks and APIs. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you need to export your settings, don't write your own export functionality. Integrate with features. And test your code. Testing is very important. One, to make sure your code works, and two, to try to test it in situations you're not sure it's going to be used, just to see how robust you can make it. So since I actually do have the time, I'm going to go through contributing a module and writing your own custom module. So if you want to contribute a module, first thing you need to ask yourself, could others use this? Seriously, is your module abstracted enough? Take your specific problem and see if you can step back at a higher level and think of it in a way that could be used, the problem could be solved for other people. Name your module appropriately. Namespace it based on dependencies. So if your module depends on another one, try to work that into the title. So when people have a quick glance in Google search results or the Drupal results, they gain a quick understanding of what your module does. It's important to be clear, not clever, with your module name. Just make it easy for people to understand. And it should indicate what it does. I wish I had my speaker notes. So for my custom module, for that scenario, I wrote my own custom one, and I thought of it abstractly that, hey, I think others could use this. So I created one called Workbench Scheduler. It's a scheduling module for Workbench. I could have named it Workbench Moderation Scheduler, but I think this is still pretty clear because it gives an indication of what it does. You want to provide a detailed description if you're contributing your module back. Explain what the module does and what it does not do. Outline any dependencies it requires, whether that be other modules or other technologies. You want to help your fellow readers to determine if they should use your module. Just like when you are searching for modules and you're looking for detailed descriptions, provide others with detailed descriptions. Help the community. So that's what I do. I'm not saying you have to provide a page-long description like I did here, but just outline how your module works, and I tell it, I say basically, you can create different transition states between moderation states. You can apply those schedules to different nodes and different revisions, and these schedules can be exported using features. And I list out the dependencies. Workbench moderation, I require the date module and the date pop-up module. If you're going to contribute your module, be a good maintainer. Bugs are badges, not bruises. If people start contributing bugs to your project, do not take it as a hit to your ego. Take it as a badge of honor that people are using your module and they want to help you make it better because they want to use it. So participate in the issue queue. When people start asking for functionality or asking why this doesn't work a certain way, comment back to them, help them understand how to use your module so they'll use it. And then update release and improve your module based on feedback, based on patches, based on feature requests, based on security issues that come up. Make your module better so you help make the community better. I think that was touched upon in the keynote this morning, basically. So that's what I do with my module. It's been up for about a year now. We've had a lot of people contribute issues to it, and I try to go through those issues and respond to them. I've had a lot of patches come in from just people all over the world, and they're like, hey, we want to use this. I found this bug with it. Here's the solution for it. I'm like, all right, free QA. I didn't have to do that work myself. On top of that, I've gained 2 co-maintainers. I have a job. I can't do this all the time. So they help keep this module up to date. It's using the community. They're helping me keep this module better for everyone else. So let's review. Anytime you have to make a functionality decision for your module, remember to read. Research what exists, learn how to know what you're looking for and where to look for it. Evaluate any modules you find. Use the metrics on their pages to determine which one may be the best fit. Analyze any gap in the functionality. Play with the module, see where their holes are and what it does versus what you're looking for. And determine how much code do you have to change and how much effort it's going to take to close those gaps. Following these 4 steps, you can quickly and correctly determine should you use a contrib module, patch a contrib module, or write your own custom module. Now for these slides and notes, I have a couple bit.ly links here. The first one is bit.ly MidCamp R.E.A.D. R.E.A.D is all in caps. That actually links to this presentation hosted on GitHub, so you can actually go through it and see the awesome GIFs and the transitions. MidCamp R.E.A.D slides are all these slides on SlideShare, so you can just view the presentation. And then Drupal R.E.A.D links to a blog post I wrote about using the 4 steps of R.E.A.D. I'll leave these up for a second so you can copy them down. All right, and finally, don't forget there's a sprint on Sunday. You can find information about it on the schedule page of MidCamp. I'd say if you haven't participated in a sprint before, you should. It's a lot of fun. You don't have to just be a developer to participate in a sprint. No matter what skill level you have, even if you just know how to write documentation, go to the sprint, have fun, contribute to the community. I love going to sprints, so they're a lot of fun. Also, if you could give me feedback on this session, that'd be great. It's joined in 13791. Even if you want to tell me this session sucked, that's fine. It's constructive feedback. I'll take it as a badge of honor that you actually stayed through the whole thing. Or you can contact me again on Twitter at MikeMiles86. And if you have any questions, we actually do have time for them, because when I practice this, I'm a lot slower at it. Obviously, I'm a lot faster here, so we have some time for questions.
One thing I've noticed with people starting out is you sort of address the gap between, when you're looking at modules, the gap between what you want, what the module does. I think there's also, like your opinion on this, an opposite problem where people will install modules that have it does what they do, what they want, but way more than they need. And, it's fine if nothing goes wrong, but it could lead to complications with other modules or bugs or just conflict with other modules.
So the question, I want to make sure I have it right, is my opinion on not about people finding gaps, but people getting modules that do way too much than what they're looking for?
Yeah, it does what they do, but
a lot more.
Other things, yeah.
So I think one way to help mitigate that is talking to the community, participating and asking questions about, hey, I want to use this module for this functionality, and people are going to be like, oh, hold off, it does a lot more than you think it does.
Yeah.
So I think just discussing with others who are more experienced in the community can really help mitigate those issues and help keep that complexity down when you're building a site.
That's probably it is just, even for beginners, though, they can kind of look and see if they want some small thing, but they see like 20 things listed. Not to say you shouldn't use it, but it is something, I feel like that's a red flag to start off with, like, okay, that's something I should be thinking about.
Yeah, definitely if you find a module that does what you want, but then 20 other things, keep looking to see if there's one that only does that one thing you want. I mean, you don't want to take in all this extra code and all this extra complexity if you don't have to. I definitely agree with that.
Two questions, actually. Approach when you find something that's not for the version of Drupal that you're targeting. And I guess the second question, techniques for a team that didn't have resources to do code review. So that's the big step of like making sure the code is up to people's standards.
So, all right, the first question, what to do in a situation where you find a module but it's not for the right version of Drupal. That can be a tricky one. I would say, one, look at the issue queue, see if the maintainer is active, and if people have asked, hey, are you going to, most likely you're probably talking about if there's a module for Drupal 6 and you need it for Drupal 7. If the maintainer is like, yeah, we're working on a Drupal 7 version. If they're not, you could take the initiative to start rolling out a potential Drupal 7 version. I actually had that happen to one of my first modules I ever wrote. I wrote a Yelp integration module, and I wrote it for Drupal 6. Lo and behold, unknown to me, people were actually using it, and Drupal 7 came out, and I never updated the module, and some guy needed it for Drupal 7. He submitted to the issue queue. He's like, hey, here is... Now, he made a really big patch, but he's like, here's a big patch that's a Drupal 7 version of this module that you can start with. So I'd say talk to the maintainer and see what their input is, and then if you're not getting anything, write it yourself and contribute it back to help push them to update it. And your second question about code reviews, what do you do for teams who can't necessarily go through code reviews to stay with Drupal standards and coding standards? There are a lot of tools that can automate the standards for you. If you use, there's a IDE called PHP Storm, if you're familiar with it. What you can actually do is set it up so that all the code you write, it follows Drupal coding standards, and it'll tell you, hey, this is wrong. Hey, you have to add these comments. You have to structure it this way. So I think adding in those tools into your development environment can help train you to write code that way. It can help teams who don't necessarily have time to do code reviews to try to at least keep your code as close to standards as you could. Any other questions? All right. I want to thank you guys again for coming. Have a couple extra minutes, so grab some coffee or tea or whatnot. I'm happy to talk about this topic or anything else related to Drupal, or Boston, or Chicago, or whatever. Just find me.
Well, if you have time, would you go back and hit the slides on patches?
I can. Do you guys want to see the slides on patches?
Yes.
Yes? All right.
One thing I was going to suggest is if you're going between like doing a patch or doing a patch or writing your own, one option also is to ask for an alter hook to be put in.
Yep.
If there's a place that that you know, if you can just change something in one spot, you don't necessarily, your functionality doesn't make sense for the whole community. You have to get an alter hook put in somewhere, then you can potentially not. Or just to make your patch just an alter hook.
Yeah, that's so the comment was submit a patch that adds a hook, or ask the maintainer to add a hook to allow easier manipulation of their data to extend their module instead of having to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff. That's definitely a good point to make. And I agree with that. Just if you need a hook, make the hook, make a patch, and give it to the maintainer. Be like, hey, I think it would be great if you allow people to extend this. They may agree with it, they may not, but then you have that patch that allows you to do your work. All right, so since we have the time, creating a patch. So we left off, I created a patch. First thing you want to do, oh, my GIFs are all messed up now, is you want to go to the modules page. There's a version control tab. There's a git command. It gives you the step-by-step on how to clone the repository. You clone it with git. I use terminal to do my git stuff. You create a new branch to work from. I usually call mine something like patch / the functionality I'm adding. For this instance, it's features integration. You make changes to the code. So in this example, I am writing features integration. I do not code this fast. I would get paid a lot more if I did. This is sped up. So I'm writing a features hook to hook into features. Test your changes. Testing, again, is always important. So I see, can I make a feature, and can I export my custom mappings? And they do show up. And so I can export them to a feature, and I can re-import it into a new site. And then you generate the patch file by using the git diff command. So it's git diff, the original branch, and the changes you have output to a .patch file, which for this instance looks like this. So it tells me that since I'm adding a new file, the old one doesn't exist. That's these negatives here. And the new one is this features.inc file and the code that was added to it. And then for submitting your patch, if you think it's functionality that the module can really benefit from, and it's not just to fill your one use case, either create a new issue queue or comment on an existing issue that there may be discussion on. So for this scenario, there was no issues for features integration, so I created an issue that said it would be helpful if this module had features integration. Attach your patch to the issue queue, following the naming standards as I said before, which is the module name, brief description, the issue number, which is the node ID for that issue, and then the comment number, so that if anyone re-rolls your patch or extends your patch, it can be shown up sequentially, and explain what your patch does. So I say this patch adds features integration, as well as I had to change how these variables are stored so they use a name instead of a serial ID. And then you watch for feedback on your module. So other users hopefully use your patch and say, hey, this works as advertised. I may think it needs this tweak, or I updated, there was a problem with it. Maybe you have to update the coding standards. Take in that feedback and update your patch, re-roll it, make it better. This person says it works. I think it should use more testing, as always. I agree with that. And then again, eventually, the maintainer comes along and says, I think this is awesome. I've rolled it into the next release for the module. And giving back a patch is giving back to the community, helping the community, and that feels good. I like this skip too. I'm glad I got to show it. Thank you for the recommendation of doing these slides. Okay, so now that's the very end. One thing I will leave up, if you guys want to get a picture of it, is the flow chart. Again, I have this available online. Download it, blow it up to poster size, hang it in your office. That's fine with me. Yeah, all right, that's it. Unless there are more questions now.